Emily walked slowly, her boots crunching on the gravel, as she approached a scene that tugged at her heart. It wasn't a familiar pet she found, but a young female cat lying still on her side. The wild cat's tawny fur was stained with blood, and her hind leg lay twisted in an unnatural angle. Emily quickly recognized the signs of a vehicle collision. She paused, aware that even injured cats could be unpredictable. In her career, she had helped various wildlife, birds of prey, an occasional deer fawn, and even a bear cub, but this situation felt different. She was alone on a quiet road, facing a wild animal. "Hey there," she called softly, preparing for a hiss or a sudden escape. Instead, the cat lifted her head slightly, her amber eyes locking onto Emily's with a mix of fear and exhaustion. The cat's breathing was labored, and Emily knew that without help, this beautiful creature would not survive the night. Moving slowly, she crouched down, trying to reassure the cat. "You're in pretty rough shape, aren't you? I want to help if you'll let me." To her surprise, the cat remained still as Emily extended her hand, letting the animal sniff her. In that moment, something passed between them, perhaps a flicker of understanding or simply a resignation born from pain. The cat continued to watch her, eyes filled with a curious awareness. "You're safe now, sweetheart," Emily whispered, the term of endearment coming out with ease, despite the wildness of her new patient. "I'm going to help you." With careful movements, she made her way back to her car for a thick blanket she kept for emergencies. Once she returned to the cat, Emily gently positioned the blanket around the injured animal, creating a makeshift stretcher. The cat flinched as the fabric brushed against her wounds, yet she remained surprisingly calm. "That's it," Emily encouraged, wrapping the blanket snugly around the cat while ensuring she could still breathe. "You're doing great." As Emily lifted the bundle, she noticed how light the cat was, clearly underfed and dehydrated, likely suffering long before the injury occurred. The image of the cat suffering alone by the roadside stirred a deep sense of protectiveness in Emily. Carefully, she laid the wrapped cat in the back seat of her Subaru and weighed her options. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center was over 4 hours away in Flagstaff. With night falling and the cat in critical condition, Emily had to make a quick choice. She decided to take the cat home, where she had set up a small outbuilding for emergencies. While it wasn't the perfect environment for wildlife, it was the best chance the cat had. "Hang in there," she murmured, glancing back at her unexpected passenger as she drove off. Emily's property spanned 5 acres on the edge of town, bordered by national forest land. The little A-frame cabin had been a fixer-upper when she bought it, but the seclusion and surrounding wilderness made it worthwhile. The converted shed that served as her emergency clinic contained essential surgical supplies, medications, and a few cages of different sizes. Under the harsh lights, Emily took a closer look at the cat. It was surprisingly calm, likely due to shock and weakness rather than trust. She reminded herself that the injuries were serious: a compound fracture of its right hind leg, several lacerations, and signs of internal bleeding, all consistent with a high-speed impact. "You're lucky to be alive," she said softly while preparing a mild sedative. To treat the wounds properly and set the broken leg, she needed the cat to be unconscious. As she injected the medication, the cat's eyes stayed focused on her, creating an unexpected bond with the wild creature. "I think I'll call you Hope," she said, "because that's what you need right now." Once Hope was sedated, Emily moved quickly. She cleaned the wounds, set and splinted the broken leg, and administered antibiotics and fluids. As she worked, she talked to the unconscious animal as if it were one of her regular patients. "You've got a long road ahead, Hope, but I believe you have the fight in you. I can see it in your eyes." When the treatment was finished, Emily placed Hope in a large dog crate lined with soft blankets. She set the crate in the quietest corner of the shed, dimmed the lights, and finally stepped away to wash off the day's stresses and exhaustion. Before heading to bed, she took a moment to check on Hope once more, feeling a mixture of hope and concern for the fragile creature. The cat lay awake, her amber eyes tracking Emily's movements, though she looked groggy. "Rest now," Emily whispered. "I'll be back in the morning." That night, sleep came to Emily only in fits and starts, her mind racing with worries about her unusual patient. She recognized the risks of taking in wildlife, especially a predator like a cat. Wild animals belong in nature, and too much human interaction could hinder Hope's chances of surviving once she was released. Yet leaving her by the roadside would have meant certain death. Just until she's stable, Emily assured herself in the dark. Then I'll contact the rehabilitation center. When dawn arrived, Emily hurried to the outbuilding, half expecting to find Hope had not survived through the night. Instead, she was greeted by a different sight. The cat sat upright, alert despite her injured leg. Hope watched Emily enter with an intense gaze, her ears perked up, showing interest rather than fear. "Well, good morning to you too," Emily said, relief in her voice. "Looks like you made it through the night." In the days that followed, Hope continued to surprise everyone with her recovery. The internal bleeding stopped, her wounds healed cleanly, and she devoured the raw meat Emily provided with unexpected enthusiasm. Most striking was her demeanor. Though she never fully relaxed, Hope seemed to accept Emily's presence, observing her work with curious interest instead of displaying wild fear. Emily stayed in touch with a wildlife specialist from the Flagstaff Rehabilitation Center, who expressed both admiration for Emily's efforts and concern over Hope's prolonged contact with people. "Cats aren't like domestic felines," Dr. Martinez cautioned over the phone. "Even hand-raised ones keep their wild instincts. You need to minimize contact and avoid behaviors that create a bond." Emily nodded, understanding the importance of caution. Yet, as she spoke, she watched Hope play with a small rubber ball, a therapeutic exercise Emily had introduced to keep the cat mentally stimulated during her recovery. "I'm being careful," she reassured the doctor. The reality, however, was more complex. Despite her professional knowledge, Emily felt increasingly drawn to the wild cat. She extended her morning and evening check-ins, occasionally sitting quietly by Hope's cage, even reading aloud from her current book. Hope appeared to enjoy the sound of her voice, often settling comfortably with her eyes half closed, seemingly content. 2 weeks into Hope's recovery, Emily found that her connection with the cat deepened more than she had expected. While changing the bedding in Hope's cage, a task that usually required moving her to a temporary enclosure, something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating to the back of the crate as she typically would, Hope cautiously extended her neck. Her rough tongue darted out to brush against Emily's wrist. Emily froze, her heart racing. This wasn't a sign of aggression, it felt more like affection, Hope's way of showing trust. Tears sprang to Emily's eyes. "Hey there," she whispered, staying completely still. Hope met her gaze and blinked slowly, a sign of trust among cats. Emily instinctively blinked back, acknowledging their silent communication. Later that evening, Emily found herself sharing her feelings with her friend Michael Thompson, the town's only family physician and her occasional dinner companion. "I know it sounds silly," she said while they sat on her porch, the outbuilding visible in the fading light. "She's a wild animal, not a pet, but there's something almost knowing about her, Mike." Michael, a tall man with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair, didn't dismiss her feelings outright. As a doctor in a small town, he understood that unexpected connections can form, even in his line of work. "Nature has its mysteries," he replied, sipping his coffee. "Maybe you both needed each other right now." Emily appreciated his understanding, but concerns about Hope's future lingered in her mind. The splint would come off soon, and while Hope was healing remarkably well, returning her to the wild presented challenges. Would she be able to hunt effectively? Had their bond affected her wild instincts? The rehabilitation center had openings in a month, and Emily wondered if she should transfer Hope there for final preparation before release. "Whatever you choose," Michael said, sensing her internal struggle, "you've already given her a second chance. That's more than she would have had without you." As the weeks passed, Hope grew stronger. Emily moved her to a larger enclosure in the backyard, giving her more space and exposure to natural sights and sounds. From her kitchen window, Emily watched Hope navigate her expanded territory, testing her healing leg and stretching her powerful body along the branches Emily had installed. She observed as Hope tracked birds and squirrels beyond the mesh walls. Gradually, Emily began the delicate process of distancing herself, reducing direct contact and observation time. Emily often found herself lingering by the window, a reminder of her connection with Hope. As much as Hope needed to remember her wild instincts before returning to the wild, Emily had to brace herself for the forthcoming goodbye. The day she removed Hope's splint was a mix of joy and sadness. The fracture had healed well, and the moment the splint came off, Hope began to explore her space with newfound confidence. "You'll be ready soon," Emily reassured her, trying to keep her feelings in check, though her heart felt heavy. Hope gazed back with her bright amber eyes, tail twitching. Was it recognition, or just a typical feline reaction? Dr. Martinez from the Rehabilitation Center had recommended a release area. It was a protected wilderness about 40 miles from town, home to a decent cat population, but with ample space and prey for a newcomer. One weekend, Emily decided to visit the site. She found a quiet clearing near a stream that seemed ideal. Lots of cover and signs of rabbits and rodents, far enough from roads and human activity. The release day arrived faster than Emily anticipated. The clear, cold November morning brought the first hints of snow on the mountains. As she approached Hope's enclosure, there was a sense that something significant was unfolding. "Today's the day, beautiful girl," Emily whispered, opening the enclosure door. To her surprise, Hope entered the carrier without hesitation, settling in with a grace that felt almost ceremonial. During the drive to the release site, the car was silent. Emily frequently glanced at the carrier, catching glimpses of Hope's face through the mesh. When she reached the clearing, Emily placed the carrier in the shelter of a large pine tree and opened the door, stepping back to allow Hope to decide when to emerge. They waited in the stillness of the autumn forest, hearing only the rustling leaves and distant bird calls. Eventually, Hope appeared, cautiously peeking out from the carrier. She paused, taking in her surroundings. In an unexpected moment, she turned to look at Emily, their eyes locking for what felt like an eternity. "Go on," Emily encouraged, her voice thick with emotion. "This is where you belong." Understanding seemed to pass between them, and Hope slowly turned away, moving with growing confidence toward the edge of the forest. Emily paused again, glancing back over her shoulder. With a smooth motion that reflected her renewed vitality and grace, the cat vanished into the underbrush. For a long time afterward, Emily remained in the clearing, tears flowing down her cheeks. The depth of her emptiness surprised her. It wasn't just about losing Hope. It encompassed all the connections and separations in her life. Her failed marriage, her choice to leave a busy urban practice, and the patients she had both lost and saved over the years. "Goodbye, Hope," she quietly said to the stillness of the forest. "Be wild, be free." As winter settled over the mountain town, the days grew short, and nights lingered with snow and solitude. Emily immersed herself in her work at the clinic, finding comfort in the routine of appointments and the occasional emergencies that arose. She steered clear of the spot where she had found Hope, opting for a longer route into town, even when the snowy roads were tricky. Michael noticed the difference in her during their weekly dinners. "You did the right thing," he reassured her one evening while they sat by the fireplace, listening to the wind howl outside. "She was never meant to be a pet." "I know," Emily replied, staring into the flames. "I just miss her. It seems silly to miss a wild animal that was only in my life for a few weeks." "Not silly at all," Michael responded, his hand finding hers, a gesture that had become more common between them. "She touched something important in you." As January turned into February, Emily began to regain her balance. She thought of Hope daily, wondering how the cat was coping in the wild. The sharp ache of separation softened into a bittersweet memory. Life continued at its steady pace, and Emily discovered unexpected joy in the deepening relationship with Michael, who had become a steady presence in her life. Then, on a bright morning in early March, something remarkable happened. Emily sat on the porch, savoring her coffee while watching the sunrise color the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. She noticed a movement at the edge of the forest. "Probably a deer," she mused, "or maybe a coyote looking for breakfast in the meadow behind her home." But as the figure stepped out from the trees, her coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the wooden planks. It wasn't a deer It was a cat moving purposefully across the snow-covered ground toward her house. "Hope?" Emily whispered, hardly believing her eyes. The cat paused at the sound of her voice, tilting her head in a familiar way that made Emily's heart skip a beat. As the cat continued moving closer, Emily noticed something she hadn't seen at first. The cat was moving awkwardly, her gait uneven and labored. Without thinking, Emily stepped off the porch into the snow, forgetting her slippers in her worry. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she called softly, extending her hand as the cat approached. It was unmistakably Hope, recognizable by her unique pattern of spots. The cat stopped a few feet away, her amber eyes fixed on Emily with that same intense gaze. Then, with a sound somewhere between a chirp and a mew, she closed the gap and pressed her head against Emily's outstretched hand. The trust in that gesture brought tears to Emily's eyes. Hope had traversed miles of wilderness to find her again, but it was clear she was in distress, thinner than she should be, and something about her movement suggested more than a healed leg injury. "Let me help you," Emily said, kneeling in the snow. To her surprise, Hope allowed herself to be picked up, her body surprisingly docile in Emily's arms. As Emily carried the cat toward the house, she felt a strange vibration against her chest. Hope was purring, a sound Emily had never heard from her during her recovery. Once inside, Emily settled Hope on a blanket near the fireplace, examining her for injuries. The previously broken leg seemed fine, but Hope's abdomen was distended in a way that suddenly made perfect sense to Emily's trained eye. "Oh," she breathed, sitting back on her heels. "You're pregnant." Hope watched her with those knowing eyes, then curled into a more comfortable position on the blanket, clearly settling in. The message was clear. She had chosen Emily's home as her safe place to give birth. Emily called the clinic right away, canceling her appointments for the day. Then she phoned Michael, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and concern as she explained the situation. "She came back to me, Mike. She's going to have kittens. I'll be right over," he responded without hesitation. While waiting for Michael to arrive, Emily prepared her spare bedroom, creating a dark, quiet space with plenty of soft bedding, a cozy den for Hope. Hope wanted to deliver her kittens safely. She coaxed the cat into the room and felt relieved when Hope explored her new space before settling into a nest of blankets, purring contentedly. Michael arrived just as Emily was placing fresh water and meat for Hope. His expression was a mix of wonder and professional concern as he followed Emily to the doorway of the makeshift den. "She came all this way to find you," he marveled, keeping his voice low while they observed Hope from a respectful distance. "That's remarkable." "What should I do?" Emily asked, feeling conflicted between her veterinary training and the unusual nature of the situation. The wildlife center would advise retrapping her and releasing her away from people. Michael suggested thoughtfully, but then shook his head. "She made a choice, Emily. She chose you as her safe haven. That has to mean something." Throughout the day, Emily kept an eye on Hope from a distance, providing food and water, but otherwise allowing the cat the space she needed to prepare for what was to come. By nightfall, it was clear that labor had begun. Hope grew restless, shifting position frequently and occasionally letting out soft sounds. Emily kept a night-long vigil, sitting on the floor outside the bedroom, dozing off intermittently but waking at every tiny noise. Michael stayed close, his steady presence bringing her comfort as she navigated this unfamiliar space between the wild and the tame, between professional obligations and personal feelings. Just before dawn, the distinct, high-pitched mewing of newborn kittens filled the quiet house. Emily exchanged a joyful glance with Michael before cautiously peeking into the room. Hope lay curled around 5 tiny spotted bundles, each no bigger than Emily's palm. The cat met Emily's gaze calmly, then lowered her head to lovingly groom her little ones. 5 beautiful babies, Emily whispered, stepping back to give the new family their space. She did it. In the kitchen, Michael wrapped his arms around Emily, both of them awestruck by the miracle they had just witnessed. "What happens now?" he asked gently. Leaning into his embrace, Emily felt a wave of fatigue, but also a profound sense of purpose. Now we help her raise them strong enough for the wild. There was certainty in her voice. "They're cats, not house cats. They belong out there eventually." "Together?" Michael asked, and it wasn't a question. Emily looked up at him and saw in his expression the same commitment that had guided her decisions over the past few months. "Together," she agreed. In the following weeks, Emily found herself in a surreal, almost dreamlike state. She transformed her guest room into a nurturing space for wildlife, creating a safe haven to care for 5 growing kittens while ensuring their independence by limiting human interaction. She reached out to wildlife experts for advice and kept careful records of the kittens' growth and behavior, aiming to contribute to future wildlife care knowledge. The kittens, 3 females and 2 males, thrived under their mother, Hope's watchful eye. She was an attentive parent, instinctively teaching her young ones the basics of cat behavior, even in the cozy surroundings of Emily's home. Emily and Michael loved observing Hope as she demonstrated stalking techniques using toys to mimic natural prey. As spring unfolded, Emily began transitioning the cat family to a larger outdoor enclosure. This new space was more expansive and natural, allowing the energetic kittens to explore, climb, and practice the skills they would need to survive in the wild. Throughout this process, Emily maintained a respectful distance, avoiding direct handling to prevent the kittens from associating humans with comfort or food. Only Hope seemed comfortable enough to approach Emily occasionally, creating fleeting moments of connection that felt more like a conversation between equals rather than a typical human-animal relationship. One evening in late May, as they quietly watched the lively cat family from afar, Michael remarked, "It's almost time, isn't it?" The kittens had transformed, their spotted coats shining with health and their movements displaying the coordination they would need to live freely. Emily nodded, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. Hope knows it's time too. I can see it in how she encourages them to become more independent. Emily had already chosen a release site, an isolated area deeper in the national forest, away from roads and human activity, where prey was abundant and natural shelters were available. She had monitored the location for weeks, ensuring it was unoccupied by other cat families and provided the best environment for Hope and her kittens. On a beautiful June morning, with wildflowers blooming in the meadows and birds singing joyfully, Emily and Michael carefully loaded the cat family into separate carriers for their journey. Hope entered her carrier willingly, her knowing amber eyes meeting Emily's, hinting at the bond they shared. The kittens, now almost the size of small house cats, hesitated. They had only known the safety of Emily's home. However, they were eventually secured into their crates for transport. The drive was quiet, with Emily occasionally glancing in the rearview mirror at Michael, who had chosen to accompany her for this important moment. "You've done something extraordinary," he told her as they parked at the trailhead and prepared to carry the crates the last half mile to the release site. "You saved not just 1 life, but 6. Emily smiled softly, realizing the truth of his words. "She saved me too," she replied. She understood how this experience had reignited her passion for being a vet, helping her find hope once more. The chosen clearing was perfect. Sunlight filtered through the dense trees, and a small stream nearby offered a sense of tranquility. Signs of rabbits and squirrels were evident, assuring them the area was alive. Emily and Michael lined up the carriers with the doors facing the forest, then stepped back to give the cats space to find their way home. One by one, they opened the crates using long cords attached to the doors. The kittens emerged cautiously, instinctively clustering together as the fresh scents and sounds of the wild surrounded them for the first time. Hope, the last to leave her carrier, did so with a sense of dignity. She surveyed her new environment, taking in the air with careful sniffs before moving to join her little ones. For several minutes, the family stayed in the clearing, with the kittens gradually growing bolder in their explorations, while Hope kept a watchful eye. Then, with a clear chirping sound, she gathered her offspring using signals that required no translation. The little family moved as one towards the edge of the forest, pausing briefly at the trees. Hope turned her amber gaze to find Emily in the distance. In that breathtaking moment, their eyes met, creating a connection that felt beyond words. Then, with a flick of her tufted ears, an unspoken farewell as Emily chose to see it, Hope led her family into the shadows of the forest, disappearing from sight. Emily stood still, tears streaming down her face as Michael wrapped his arm around her shoulders in silent support. The emptiness she felt was palpable, yet it was different this time. Not a hollow loss, but a profound sense of purpose. Do you think we'll ever see them again? Michael asked quietly. Emily wiped away her tears, a smile forming despite the sadness. No, she replied confidently. And that's how it should be. They belong in the wild. As they collected the empty carriers and started the trek back to their car, Emily felt a lightness in her heart. Hope had entered their lives at a time when both she and Michael needed it most. Through that unexpected bond, Emily discovered a renewed purpose in her work and a deeper appreciation for the fragile balance between humans and the natural world. Once back in town, life began to establish a new routine. Emily expanded her veterinary practice to focus more on wildlife cases, collaborating with local conservation groups to enhance recovery methods for injured animals. Her relationship with Michael grew stronger as they found companionship and understanding in one another that complemented their independent natures. On quiet evenings, when the sunset bathed the mountains in golden light reminiscent of a cat's eyes, Emily would think of Hope and her kittens. She envisioned them roaming freely through the wilderness, wild and unrestrained, yet still connected by the invisible thread that had transformed all their lives.